Hello, and welcome back to this episode of The Engine Room. My name is Frederik, and I'm your host. So today, another one of these solo episodes. Today we'll be talking about messaging in general, right? And what we'll go into more specifically is you have managed to do your ICP, you've managed to do your segmentation. Now, what do you do from here? Because there's a lot of ways you can think about how you need to message just because you have segments and they might be on industry level, or you figured out a way to to build it or flip it on something like a perceived problem or something like that. There's a lot that goes into messaging from here, and I'm gonna do my best to go through that with you, and let's see how we do here. um so messaging in general, that's a strategic element, right? So it's part of the four P's. It's in the promotion part of the four Ps, and it's super crucial because it's really your value proposition. It's how are you going to communicate partly the problems that you're solving, partly the category that you operate in, the solutions you have, and everything in between there, basically. So there's a couple of ways to go about it, and you have already defined your ICP and your segmentation, and then you want to look at messaging. So the way I like to go about it is I like to create what I call a messaging house. And what's really important in there is to understand, like, what so what are the champions, so the people internally in the companies that you're trying to sell to, that is actually buying your product and championing it and helping you from the inside selling this product. What do they care about, right? So this actually goes into the decision making unit that you also need to control and you also need to understand, right? So what you need to do is you need to map out your decision making unit, and a decision making unit consists of a decision maker, the person who signs, the person who has the final yes or no, right? There's the gatekeeper. This is typically in B2B SaaS. For the most case, it's technology CTO type, it's a finance type, so CFO, or it's a legal person, right? So these are the typical three gatekeepers that you experience. Then you have your champion, right? And that can be like, it's based on your category and it's based on like what department you sell to internally. Then you have your influencer, which is somebody who influences the purchase, right? So not a super confusing name there, but what they do is they have a say in here. So let's take, for example, you're scoping for or you're buying for a design tool, right? So it might be the marketing manager, because design sits under marketing. It might be the marketing manager or the head of marketing who is championing it because we need a new design tool. But the designer that are sitting and doing the day to day, then they're doubling. They have two roles in the decision making unit, but they're doubling as not only user but also influencer, because if they don't like the tool, we're not going to buy it, because it's their pain we're trying to solve and it's their day to day it's going to influence. So in that way, you have to influence influence the influencers. You have to market to the influencers as well. And then you have the users, who are the people who are going to be using it every day. They're feeling the pain daily, right? So what you want to do is you want to map out who is your champion, right? And what are they experiencing right now? What are they trying to solve? What problem are they trying to solve? You need to be able to communicate that. You also have to understand how are they doing it right now, so you can actually communicate to them, here is the way you're doing it right now, and here's why that there's a better way to do that now. You have to communicate the limitations, is what I basically just said. The limitations of how they are currently doing it. Blockers to why they're not doing it better or differently. Then you need to communicate, what capabilities do your product have? What features enables these capabilities? And then what are the benefits? And if we dive into that a little bit, so capabilities, let's take a great example, right? Calendly or cal.com, it's a calendar service, it's a calendar link service, right? And the capability is that it allows people to book a meeting directly in your calendar. But that's a capability, that's not a feature. Feature is there's a link, right? It's the meeting link, it's the booking link. That's the feature. And then the benefit is you don't have to waste time and do calendar gymnastics to figure out when, right? You don't need all the emails back and forth. you just send over the link, and then they find a time that fits them and that fits you because it's free in your calendar, right? So you need to map that out, and that needs to be on the on the champion level, right? And then you also need to ask yourself, what are they trying to achieve, right? What are their goals? What are their and like a really good, it's super, it's not super complicated, but there's this rule of asking why 5 times, right? So what are they trying to achieve? Why are they trying to achieve this? What are the blockers? Why are they blocked? What are their fears of doing something like this? Why? So you go into that and you build out this messaging. And so this is one way to do it. And this can be in some cases, this is something you can do just once for the entire decision making unit, because you'll be able to communicate that in the same way. And there's a couple of different variables that you need to account for here, because there's also a matter of, in order to do what I'm about to explain, you have to consider how much budget do we have, what are the audience sizes that we're going to do, or that we're going to market to, and how big of an influence are these different people, and how much in depth do we want to go. But what you can do is you can create buyer type messaging. And what I just explained with asking, like, what are they trying to achieve? Why? What are their pains? Why? What are their goals? Why? Then, you can do that for any of the people in the buying group. So let's say it's probably a good idea to do it for the decision maker, because I can't remember who has this data, but there's some data sets that indicate that in a decision making unit, something like in 80% of the time, if the entire decision making unit is familiar with the product, that's the one they're going to go with, or the product they are familiar with is the one they're going to go with, or the brand, right? So there's a good reason to be visible to the entire decision making unit, right? So you can build out and do buyer type messaging. So you can do it for the decision maker. What are they trying to achieve? Why aren't they doing it right now? What are their goals? Why? So on and so forth. And you keep doing that also for the gatekeepers. What you typically see is that the champion and the influencer and the user, they, in a lot of times, they have very different motivations than the decision maker and the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper, typically, they care about the money, right? Are we saving money buying this, or are we making money buying this? That's almost always what it comes down to, right? Is there a good business case? Is there a good ROI case on what we're trying to invest in here? Legal, like, that makes sense, right? Do we stay compliant? Something like that. Is that something that we can buy that's not gonna do anything to our compliance levels, or that we're not breaking any laws and all that? And I'd see that would be something around, is how easy do we integrate with the rest of the tech stack, or all that stuff, right? So there's something you can do there in terms of sharpening your messaging and being more precise in your messaging, and then you can actually split that out across the entire you can split that out across the entire buying group. So you can do it for all the people in the buying group, right? Okay, so what you understand now is that you have your segmentation, and then you have your buyer types, or your buying committee, buying group, decision making unit, a lot of names. So you have that, and then you also know what type of messaging do you need to give to these types of people, right? And keep in mind, messaging is not tactical. Messaging is strategic, right? So it's not that messaging is not, what do I put in the ad copy, or what do I put on the landing page? Messaging is overarching themes of what we're trying to communicate, back to like pains and why, right? So it's overarching, and it's a value proposition or something like that. It's not all the way. So it's quite high resolution level. It's not down where we have to do some work to translate it into something that we can actually put on a landing page or put in an ad, right? What you're then doing here is you're taking, again, a lot of dependencies here, but you're taking, so let's say you have the segment and your buyer types. And from here, you're then creating what we call content pillars, right? So based on, the fears they have and the goals they're trying to achieve, and, all these things we mapped out, we say, okay, what are we then talking about to these people? That could be, if we take the example from before with the calendar booking thing, Calendly, one of the content pillars that they could have would be like efficiency of work, or like hours saved planning meetings, or something like that, right? So you can have a content pillar that is like, it's an overarching subject that ties back into. So I'm always viewing this as a hierarchy, right? So I have my overarching messaging, which is whatever. In most cases, it's save time, because that's basically, or save time and make money, right? But that's not really a value proposition. That's what everybody does. So you have to find something that's different from that. But I always view it as a hierarchy. So what is my overarching messaging? What am I trying to say in the grander scheme of things? What is my strategic narrative? What is my different way of doing something? And then I'm mapping all my content pillars into that. So I'm always making sure that that the content pillars that I'm posing ties into this overarching strategic narrative, right? And then below here, I go into topics, right? And I can even split it out and say, based on the content pillar, then I can split it out into platforms and say, so on LinkedIn, I'm going to say this. On TikTok, I'm going to say this. On YouTube, I'm going to say this. So then I go into actual topics, and per topic, I can break that out into episode titles, right? So you can get super granular with this, and then based on that, you can even create like what we call it content flywheel. So we say, now we're creating this one podcast episode, and that can turn into, you know, 6 social media snippets. It can turn into a long form YouTube. It can turn into this, can turn into a blog, turn into a newsletter, a LinkedIn newsletter. It can turn into 5 social media snippets that can then become, 5 for LinkedIn and whatever, right? So you can then run the content flywheel you're creating every once in a while, and based on the subjects or the topics that ties into your content pillar, that ties into your overall strategic narrative, that ties into your ICP, that ties into your segments, that ties into your ICP, right? So that way, everything kind of aligns together. And when you view it like that, so it's both up and down, right? When I'm looking at it, it makes sense both up and down. So what you gain from doing this is you're going to have very aligned messaging, right? So a lot of people talk about product market fit and go to market fit, but there's also a message market fit that you need to consider, because if you're not delivering the right messages, or if you're not saying the right things in your content, just in general, it's not necessarily just ads, it's just content in general. If you're not saying the right things and it doesn't resonate with the consumer or the buyer, then you're just creating content for the sake of creating content. You have to be very strategic about what it is that you're trying to say. All right. So that was a little bit of a deep dive or semi deep dive, right, into how you are looking at different segmentation, and then how you can actually build how you can build, go lower and lower on the resolution ladder, and be more and more tactical about what you create, right? So that's a really, really good way to translate something that's very strategic, like a strategic narrative that matters to your ICP, translate it into something that is actually, tangible for the different buyer types, and something that can then be translated into episode titles or LinkedIn organic posts. All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. I hope that you enjoy it. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week.